Goosebumps plus the Magic School Bus, you get... Oof, how do I break down this to make sense? Round the Twist is one of those few Australian TV series that I can recall coming to America. It originally premiered on Fox Kids back in the mid-90s, and it stuck in my head for these 20-odd years. The series was based off a handful of short stories by Paul Jennings and several book series starting with Unreal. We follow this ordinary family, the Twists, to their new home, a lighthouse on a cliff. And they get thrusted into the craziest, most out-of-this-world events. I've never seen a show like this at the time. I remember it because they created a children's television series that could also be enjoyed by adults. They pushed a lot of things, from relationships, comedy, and crude humor that would never fly on American TV. My memory is fuzzy on the series, but I'm pretty sure several episodes never aired in the US because there were some that I never remembered seeing. One of them was all about how high the guys could shoot their piss. That would never be done here. They censored Gohan pissing on a rock in DBZ. They ain't showing this episode. Before I get into detail, let's take a look at the cast. Like I said, the Twists are mostly your ordinary family. We have Tony Twist, who specializes in making odd but interesting forms of art. The family didn't start off in a good position financially. Tony's very skilled in coming up with all kinds of abstract designs, and he really didn't care what people thought about him. He would go to the city dump, pick up bits of trash, and make sculptures out of it, with the detriment of his kids getting laughed at. Tony, he gets developed well. Through the series, he starts off making things out of junk, but later he starts making stuff for companies, schools, even characters he doesn't like. The man's very respectable, but he stays behind the scenes to the kids. The meat of the show is us going with Peter, Linda, and especially Bronson's crazy adventures. Now, Peter and Linda, they're twins. Peter is the most reactive. He likes to show off, act cool, but he tends to not really know what he wants, which leads him into trouble. One minute he'll be running away from bullies, the next he'll join them if he gets an advantage from it. He has an on and off girlfriend, Fiona. Peter is my favorite of the whole series because he learned a lot of hard lessons. I don't want to spoil the ending, but Peter really matured in his ways of accepting when he failed and tried to fix his messes. Now, Linda. You can count on her. She tries to be the most level, tries to keep everyone together. However, she does act on impulse. Whenever an opening happens, she'll go, "Oh, I can excel in this. I can use this to better something." Gets her in trouble a chunk of times. You can always see Peter and Linda are always trying to balance the family and like back and forth and argue a lot of times in the way they do things. I did hate one thing. This happens with Peter and Linda. The show was bad when it comes to extra traits. Peter loves guitar, but for the most of the series, they never did anything with it. And Linda was good at martial arts, but it only appeared in season 1, and it would have been useful in some episodes. That brings me to Bronson, the firecracker, the young sibling that doesn't think a step ahead. From him mixing up words, he would always cause his own problems. Bronson had some resentment. He's the youngest one, so he always tries to act like his brother. Some good came out of that, some bad. He's always torn on what to do. He knows he wants to do the right thing, but he will go to extremes in doing it. But what is this show about? Why is the show unique? The characters are thrown into the most ridiculous and fantastical situations, from Bronson not washing his feet for 6 months so he can save a turtle, to Peter microwaving his underwear gaining superpowers. Every episode you didn't know what would happen to the twists. One day they'd be talking to a ghost. The next they'd find a duplication machine in the lighthouse. Peter turning into a werewolf. A flock of birds pooping over an entire home, trapping them inside. Bronson finding a dragon. There were no limits to what the Twist family would fall into or cause themselves. What made me love the series is how well they took care of building the stories. If your series could basically do anything, you don't want to overload the audience. They slowly built it up. We started out with a ghost that haunted their outhouse. Then it went into theirs to find someone's bones. Peter was cursed to always end his sentence saying,
"Without my pants."
Then they turned it up. Bronson became a father of a green baby that came from their cabbage patch. Linda gained the power of being invisible. And then there's 3 particular episodes that are so out there. Peter having a baby with a magical tree that could project a human form. An entire episode where Peter and Linda had their brains sucked out, where Bronson has to go rescue them. That's not even the weird part. They still talked and moved around. And probably the most famous episode, Bronson accidentally swallowing a rare fish that gave him the power to spin his willy as fast as a motorboat. Think Tails from Sonic, but on the other side. And you got invested in all of that. No matter how absurd things got, the jokes, the magic, the fairy tales, they always lended themselves to being fun and helping out the twists. Everything was treated serious. These things that happen in our world, we accepted. But they never kept things too strict. Like Bronson could screw up, reflect on what he did, fix his mistake, but he'll get helped out by a water spirit to win that pissing contest. I was also surprised how well they were consistent with stories. They were mixing plots and things from Jennings stuff, but also original writings. They almost never stepped on things. One example, ghosts could take over a person if they get struck by lightning, but in another episode they had ghosts that could transform into a person's appearance to not go against that established rule, and they still couldn't interact with the world. Anytime the kids got something that would be OP, they dealt with it. I'm not blindly praising the series. There are things they screw up on. There was one episode, Bronson was afraid of ghosts. That obviously doesn't make sense. Tony wouldn't believe the kids sometimes when he sees and dealt with all the crazy nonsense that happens. And as good as they were with the twists, the secondary characters weren't used good. The Gribble family being the big ones. They're the bad guys, quote unquote, of the series. Gribbles is the town's main realtor. In later seasons, Gribble tried to run for Senate. He causes all kinds of problems for the twist. He's always scheming ways to sell the lighthouse or throw them out with some legal loophole. The problem is, he's the one who sold them the lighthouse in the first place, and there was nothing that Tony or the kids stumbled on for Gribbles to all of a sudden get big time investors to buy the location. If it was valuable for a company to invest, you wouldn't have sold it to the poor family of the Twists in the first place. If they had made it where Nell was the one who picked them, then it would have worked, but they never did that. We also have Gribble's wife, Cecilia. In season 1, she was a nurse for a hospital, but that part of her completely gets dropped for the rest of the series. She was just scheming with her husband. And of course we have Nell Rickards, one of the original owners of the lighthouse. We don't get a full backstory on her, but Nell functions kind of like Yoda, the wise one who helps the kids through problems and gives backstory to things that happened in the past. We do know all the weird things like the ghosts and stuff have been happening for a long time. Nothing really phases her. There's some tragic past to her family, but really after the first season, Nell really got sidelined. For the most part, in seasons 3 and 4, she hardly ever appears. I don't think it's entirely the writer's fault. Another cool thing about the show, the series would show us material not seen in the episode as background for the credits. Not just bloopers, but stuff cut out or different takes from scenes. But there were some episodes where we saw Nell in those credits and she was not in the episode. So I'm guessing they wrote and filmed a lot, but things had to be cut, and probably what usually went were side things and Nell. Besides the series doing all kinds of fantastical adventures, each of the 4 seasons had an underlying narrative story that went through the episodes, paying off in the season finale, or gave us information on what the lighthouse has been through. Tony also has a love life that went through the entire series. The Twist family mother had passed away before the series, so Tony eventually met someone, Faye, and she became a main cast member. Faye is one of the kids' teachers, so it brought up some issues and focus episodes around Bronson too. The last big thing of note is they went through multiple cast changes. The series was produced across 12 years from 1990 to 2002, but it was an on and off thing, so actors left through the 4 years. It doesn't affect the series, but you see it regardless. The lighthouse changes the most. The sets got more detailed as they went along. Season 1 was very plain and white. Luckily, the set designers also paid attention to the changes done with the location lighthouse. There was a window that was added to the main doorway area, but it caused issues. Sometimes they use old footage and the lighthouse would have different outside railings. The outhouse / dunny disappeared after season 1. It came back in season 4, but in a different spot. The lighthouse gets a new paint job. It changes all over the place. As for actors, no one survived through all 4 seasons. One of the side characters that was played by one of the show's writers, He came close, but even then, in season 4, he was replaced. I don't want to say one cast was better than the other. All the actors through the 4 seasons, with a few exceptions, I came to enjoy all of them. But I still prefer if actors don't change. I saw Tony first played by Richard Moyer. I would have liked to everyone continue on. It was kind of annoying because the original kid actors wanted to continue the show, but they had decided to recast because they were older. I thought that was dumb. I personally thought that wasn't a big deal. I thought the stories could have been told with the older kids. They ended up doing that anyway. Season 3 and Season 4 were shot after each other, and it worked fine. There are some subtle differences to the characters with how the actors portrayed them. 2 examples I could think of. The first Bronson relied more on screaming and prop comedy, while Season 3 and 4's Bronson was more body comedy. And there are other drawbacks. Because of the cast changes, I kept forgetting Gribble's kid and his friend's name all the time. Then you had the different Fionas. I kept thinking they were different girlfriends that Peter had. The only cast change that I did not like was the second Faye. The actress played her too differently from the first one, but the third one they hired for the 4th season, she got the character right. One thing I really hated, you had a series that could do anything. They had time travel, alternate dimensions, mermen, intelligent fish. How come no one ever considered to bring back all the cast into a big 2-parter? Just different dimensions around the twist. Or at least hire the old actors to play guest roles. That would have been a fun thing, seeing Richard Moyer come back as a one-off character acting with Andrew Gilbert. It was a missed opportunity. I also found it odd that there were so many ghost episodes. They never did an episode about the twist's mother. I thought that would have been a no-brainer to cover. It would have been interesting to get to know her. Maybe the writers thought it would have been too emotional to cover. I hope I explained this series good enough. It's very hard to talk about. I highly suggest it if you were a big fan of the Goosebumps live-action show. That's the closest thing I could compare it to. The best way you can watch the series is buy the Australian DVD set. It was never released in the US or any streaming sites.